You're listening to the Launchcast, the podcast about leadership, business, life, and growth with me, your host, George Andriopoulos.
It's like food for your ears.
At this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast. I love this music. Episode 107 entitled It's My Party and I'll Float If I Want to. We have an incredible guest on today. I am so excited. You are here today with the launch dad himself, George Andriopoulos, bringing you your favorite podcast on the planet. And we are talking leadership, we are talking business, we are talking life, and we are talking growth. And we're doing it all today with my guest, Mr. Bobby Rubio. What's happening, Bobby?
Hey, how's it going, George?
So nice to have you here, Bobby. So I want to jump right in. So Bobby Rubio, guys, is the writer and director of the Pixar Spark Shorts film Float, which is streaming right now on Disney+. So you got to download that right now, guys, because it is an incredible piece. He is currently working with Pixar Animation Studios on a top-secret project as a story artist. Bobby has worked on many well-known projects, including Incredibles 2, Up, Inside Out, Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Avatar: The Last Airbender. He has also worked as a freelance comic cover artist for Marvel Entertainment. I got to tell you, man, before we jump in, you are living my childhood dream, dude.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate
it. It was my dream to actually be a comic book artist when I was a kid.
Oh, for real? Did you draw to? Oh, no.
I did. No, I totally
Oh,
did.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I would think so. You're in New York. Marvel was there. Did you ever visit Marvel?
I didn't visit Marvel. I had a very I was the child of immigrants, so I had a very sheltered childhood.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I would walk down to the corner store every single week, buy the new comic books, take them home, trace them, try and learn how to draw them, and yeah, man, I respect what you do so much because it's just it was always such a passion of mine. So that's why I was so drawn to doing this interview with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I've loved comics since I was a kid, and and actually it was probably the best thing I could go to. Like my mom was like, "You got the talent, your education wise, I don't know, maybe you should be an artist." It seemed like that was the route. My path was to be an artist. So I mean, and it's worked so far, so it's all good.
Yeah, it has definitely worked, man. I'm going to ask you the question that we start with all our guests here on the show, Bobby. Are you a leader?
I am.
Talk to me about that. What is your definition of a leader?
My definition of a leader is a person that looks out for his team, and he or she also takes care of his people and encourages them to do the best possible work they can, and they collaborate and they try to create this atmosphere where anything can be thrown, any stories or any situation can be given to me, and I'd like to take care of my team, and I'd like to think that I'm a fair leader, and so that's how I see as a leader, is a person that takes care of his team and his people around him and makes sure that everything works out moving forward with your story and in animation.
Sure. So that team concept is something that we really stress on this podcast. So you and I talked about this, but this podcast is really about leadership and the unconventional journey too. So I love when our audience gets to listen to these different perspectives. We've had such an array of guests on this show, the very few guests that we've had so far. And it's so cool to see these different journeys and how our guests have attained leadership, and what it really does is the through line is that anybody could really do this, right?
Right.
In terms of being a leader, and so that concept of the team, that's an idea that we sort of hear from most of the leaders that we've spoken about, and it seems to be a common trait. How important has your team, whether it's been the team you work with or your team at home, how important has your team been in terms of supporting your success?
Oh, very much so. From home, I think of my wife, who has gone through me working in LA. I worked at Disney, and I brought my family up here to Oakland, and she was very supportive. And she also, we discussed it. We discussed my career. So she was like, I think that Pixar is probably the best route right now for you. So as far as, that being a team, I could bounce ideas off of her. Is it best if we stay in LA, or should we take this risk and go to Oakland? And luckily she is a good sounding board of where my career should go. As far as my team here at Pixar, when it was Float, I have a producer, an amazing producer, Chrissy Kababa, who I was able to bounce ideas off of, and she was great with the storyline of Float. And not only that, I also had an editor, Greg. Greg was amazing. He helped us fine tune our story, and I try to create this atmosphere where everyone, like I said, Greg or Chrissy, can come aboard and contribute to the story and make our story even better. That's Greg Amundsen. I want to mention that.
Yeah, and what an incredible story it was.
Thank you.
Let's kind of go start early on. So you grew up in San Diego, California, right?
Yes, I did.
All right. And so throughout your journey, did the research on you, saw that you went to California Institute of the Arts until from 91 to 94. You attended Morse High School before that. What was life like for Bobby Rubio in terms of attaining the end goal of being a comic book artist and eventually an animator, storyteller? What was life like for Bobby Rubio growing up trying to attain that dream?
Okay. Well, I'm a son of an immigrants too. So like my parents are from the Philippines. My dad was in the Navy. My mother had her own shop where she made clothes and sewing shop. And so I saw them work very hard, and especially my mother. I was usually with her in the shop, and my mother was really great. She, by having a store, a Filipino lady in the 80s, to have her own store, it showed me that things were possible, that you could be your own boss. And I saw that in my mother. My mother encouraged me to draw my own comics when I was in 6th grade. And here in San Diego, we have the San Diego Comic Con. So when I was younger, I would draw comic book pages, and then I would go to the Comic Con at 16, showing editors, Marvel editors, and other comic book editors my artwork, and I would get feedback. And I think it was great that there was the Comic Con, because then at 16 I was actually talking to real professional editors, and it started opening my world into that this is a possibility. And so I think that also started the leadership qualities. Sure. by like now I'm actually starting this business. And I actually got my job after college, though. I went to Cal Arts, and then Cal Arts, of course, you learn the trade. And after Cal Arts, I got an internship, which led to Disney and also another comic book company. But the beginning phases, as you're talking about my childhood years in San Diego, I've learned leadership through my mother and through trying to be a comic book artist through the Comic-Con, trying to become a comic book artist at the early age of 16.
Did you have any heroes within the comic industry that influenced you throughout that time?
Yes, my favorite comic book artist was George Perez, and he's from New York and he's Puerto Rican, but I actually thought he was Filipino because the Spanish last name. I was like, oh, George Perez, he might be Filipino. But I mean, it's cool that I thought that was cool too, because when I saw his comic covers and I saw a Spanish name on it, I felt like, wow, empowered that, okay, maybe this guy's Filipino. I'm Filipino. I could do this. So,
Sure.
but not only that, I mean, of course, we all love Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and all the comic book greats. And so those guys were also my heroes. And I'm so grateful to have met Stan Lee and while he was here. So, yeah, those guys were definitely my heroes.
Yeah, I saw a picture that you had posted on social media of that, and I couldn't even imagine standing next to the guy. You know, not just because of my affinity for comics themselves, but I'm such a fan of like the entire MCU and everything that they've done with that. It must have been insane being with the
It
guy.
is, because like when you stop and think about it, like he was kind of like our Walt Disney.
Yeah.
He created this entire world. I mean, when you think of creators, the top creators now, you're like, Stan's got to be top 3 at least, at very least. And like to meet him and wow, all this wealth of stories and rich characters that he created. It was incredible to be in that room, and I was so inspired and so grateful that I had my time with him.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I had an experience when I was a kid. We did this summer program called Summer Horizons, right? It was basically like a school for like we have a gifted and talented program here. Where
Oh, cool.
And so we were doing this summer program. And one of the kids in the program, I recognized his last name, and I just figured it was because he was from the same town. And then we wound up doing some kind of project that was based on comics. And all of a sudden, he comes in one day with this heap of comics. And I'm like, the teacher's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, the teacher knew. We were kind of like, what is this about? And he's like, oh, my dad's a comic book artist for DC Comics.
Sweet.
Bob Rozakis.
Oh, cool.
And he gave us this brand new series, and I cannot think of the name of it. Too, I was obsessed with it because it was like these anti-hero teams. Oh man, it was so cool for me. It really like fueled at the time my desire. But hey, look where I am now. I didn't make it.
You got your own business. You're doing a podcast. You're like,
I'm not complaining. But in an alternate life, man, that was it. So you mentioned comic books. After Cal Arts, you did an internship with Disney and Jim Lee with Disney and one with Jim Lee at Image Comics, right?
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So straight after Cal Arts, I had a choice to where do I go? Both comics and animation wanted me. So I went to animation first. I went to Disney in Florida. I don't know. Have you ever been to Disney World and in the past where they had the animation? There was the fishbowl where you could see the animators actually working behind the scenes.
No, I haven't. I don't think I've been there since 1996, probably.
Okay, because it's gone now. But during the time when they were working on Mulan and Lilo and Stitch, you could walk by and see the animators behind glass as they were working in Florida. So I did an internship in Disney World, Florida as an animator, and I learned animation there for, I believe I was there 3 months. And then after that, in the fall, I went to go to Image Comics in San Diego, where I'm from. And Jim Lee was the X-Men comic book artist, and now he had his own studio. And I did an internship with him. And then after the internship, I was like, Jim, I want to be a comic book artist. I think I would like to stay here. But he told me, you know what, if I were you, the comic book industry is dying right now. Marvel just went bankrupt in 1994.
Yeah.
And if I were you, I would go into animation. And so I followed his lead, and then I went to LA to Disney, and my first movie was Pocahontas. So, but I am grateful that Jim was like, for your sake, you probably should go that other direction.
Yeah,
And
which was great advice at the time, because
Yes.
when you look back at I happen to be such a comic book buff in terms of the historical data behind it, and that was the time when Marvel dumped properties in terms of the filming rights
right,
that
right,
caused this whole split of X-Men going to Fox and Spider-Man going to Sony, and
right,
stuff that they're still trying to reconcile today.
right.
Um,
Yeah, you're kind of like, had that not had happened, maybe we wouldn't have had the great MCU we had today. Maybe in some weird parallel world, there is no MCU.
Isn't that insane? Because I
Yeah.
remember that they sort of leaned on Iron Man as that first major character, and
Right.
people were kind of like, the non-comic book aficionados are like, who's Iron Man?
Right, right. Why don't they do Spider-Man? You're like,
Yeah,
because they can't. They don't own Spider-Man.
yeah. Oh, so crazy. And so you move on to you started working on Pocahontas, training to be an animator, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you made animator on Treasure Planet,
Yes.
and then 2D animation. Talk about what happened with that.
Oh, okay. And then 2D animation kind of died because of this company called Pixar. and I'm
Damn you,
like,
Pixar.
I know, right? Ah. I had a buddy who was working at Pixar at the time, and I was working on Treasure Planet, and he was like, hey, man, we're working on this superhero family movie. And I was like, oh, I so want to work on that. What is it? And he's like, I can't tell you. And of course, it's Incredibles.
Sure.
And so I I was like, you know what? I am going to Pixar, and one day I am going to work on Incredibles 2. And I did. Of course, it took 14 years for that to happen, but it happened. So, but I'm so happy that it did.
Yeah, absolutely. So you sort of make your way there eventually. You eventually went to Pixar, and you've been there for 12 years. I want to take a break from that just to touch on family a bit. So
Okay.
you're married. You've been married since '97 to your wife Susan, right? And
Yes.
You have 3 wonderful kids,
Yes.
Harrison, and then your twins Alex and Will, right?
That's correct.
So when we spoke yesterday, and of course, it's no secret with your short float what the idea is behind it. But when we spoke yesterday, you were very candid with me about your son Alex being diagnosed as on the spectrum, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So the idea for Float is one that you had been carrying for 12 years, from what I read.
Yes.
And when your son was 2 years old and he was diagnosed with autism, you explained how difficult the diagnosis was for you to handle, which eventually led to a suggestion from your wife. So do you want to get into that story a little bit?
Sure. Okay. So my son was diagnosed at 2.5, and it was like Christmas time, actually. And I didn't know at the time, but I was going through a depression. I was in my bedroom under the covers in the dark. I remember my brother came over and he was playing with my sons, and he was like playing with Alex and Will and Harrison, and he saw that I was locked in my room, and he's like, Bobby, what's going on? And I told him, Alex has autism, and he didn't know how. He tried his best to make Christmas good, and my wife like a couple months went by, and my wife was like, "You can't continue on like this. You gotta. You're a storyteller. Why don't you tell this story? And you're a comic book artist, so why don't you do that?" And so I took that I took that advice, and I decided to make Alex the comic book. And I drew this cover, and I believe it's also on the Pixar Spark Shorts extras. You could see the cover, and the cover is this image of a father and his son. They're standing in a field of dandelions, and the sun is floating. And it was called Alex at the time. And the tagline was, I believe it's a father's journey and a special child.
Yep.
And I was full on going to do it, but emotionally I wasn't ready. So I put that comic book aside, and then I didn't go back to it until about 3 years later. And I decided it's time. I think I'm ready. And I started drawing storyboards for it. And those storyboards I eventually pitched to the executive producer of Spark Shorts, which is Lindsay Collins. I showed it to Lindsay. Lindsay thought it was perfect candidate for the Spark Shorts program, and that's how Float was made.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. And from what I read about the way Pixar works, Pixar releases one movie every couple of years, right? Or at least I read that in an article. And so the best way to sort of get a project out there was to do a short with Spark Shorts, right? At the time.
Well, I believe Spark Shorts came about. Well, we didn't even know that there was going to be a Disney Plus platform at the time.
Sure.
In fact, I think the program we were just doing it just to give other people opportunities to learn how to make a film here at Pixar. And luckily, the Disney Plus streaming service came about, and now we can put the Spark Shorts on there, and it just happened to work that way. At least that's how I saw it. I don't know, maybe behind the scenes we always knew that it was going to go there, but they never told me. I was just under the impression that we're making this film, and we hope there's a place to put Float somewhere down the line.
Well, that's where we discovered it. Honestly, we got Disney Plus day one. And my kids and I were tooling around and saw Float.
Yeah.
And I go, oh man, this is great. And I had got to make a couple of calls, and I had contacted Dave Thompson, that we both know, and yeah, it was incredible. We watch those shorts all the time, not just Float, but our favorite is the Forky ones.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, Bob Peterson makes those, and those are funny. Those are hilarious.
Oh, those are great. We spent, my kids and I must have spent a good hour just quoting those last night. It was great.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's funny.
So the message of Float
yeah.
is about sharing and celebrating our differences,
Mm-hmm.
in essence, right?
Yeah.
And since its debut on Disney Plus, and this is something that I love, I read this somewhere on the internet, Float has enabled people to bring their own interpretations to the story through its metaphor of floating, whether it's being brown, being LGBTQ, or just being unique. People are talking about representation and how it matters. They're sharing what this means to them and its importance. And that was a quote from Chrissy Kababa, the producer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was what was so unique when we first checked out Float. Because my interpretation initially was autism, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? This could mean anything. This is really, it was just so ingeniously done, man.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why we put the word difference at the end. I didn't say dedicated to all children of autism, because and also once you find out also too with autism, you talk to one kid who has autism, you've only talked to one kid with autism. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
And so But I saw when I was pitching it around originally, people were interpreting the floating as different. It depended on which person I was talking to. I did talk to a buddy of mine who interpreted it as like he said, "I get it, man. I get it. I have a daughter who wants to be an artist, and I know that that's not. I don't want her to be an artist because like her future, I don't know how that road will go about." And so,
Yeah.
and so I metaphorically put rocks in her backpack to stop her from doing what she wants. But I realize at the end, I gotta let her go, let her do her own thing, and I gotta accept that she's an artist
Yeah.
because I'm miserable, and she's miserable.
Yeah.
And once I've done that, and once I've learned to accept and celebrate her for who she is, then everything was great. And I was listening to his interpretation, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. That's pretty much it."
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell him no, it's autism. It actually made me feel great about it, that it resonates in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And so I was it's funny, like I kind of just wasn't planning that, but I'm so glad that it worked out that way.
Well, that's the thing about art, right? That's the thing about
Yeah.
art is that um, every set of eyes has a totally different interpretation of what art is.
Right.
So it's really interesting when somebody sits down and looks at a piece like Float and gives you their interpretation, because it kind of makes you realize where their mindset is at, and what matters to them. And
Yes.
so somebody may say, "Oh, that could be a child with autism. That could be a child that feels different, a child that's LGBTQ." And so it's so beautiful, man. And as a leader, and this is what I really wanted to get into with this.
Okay.
I relate with you on a few different levels. One is the importance of being a leader as a father, right?
Right.
And of course, now you're working with a medium. You're not just Bobby Rubio that people don't know anymore. You're the creator of Float. You're the writer and director of Float, and this is a
Right.
story that's very personal to you. And so there's a point as a leader where when you put a piece of work out, a piece of art out, or an expression of yourself, where it shifts from, "Hey, I'm just putting this out," to what's my responsibility now that I'm putting this out there to do the right thing with it. You
Right.
know what I mean? So
Yes.
talk about that from the perspective of being a dad. Like what kind of responsibility you felt with this piece
Okay.
as a father putting this out there.
Yeah, interesting enough is I remember when I was doing this, one of the things that I was thinking of was somebody told me somebody told me this quote, and I love it. That and it applies to the short, is that at first I wanted to change my kid to fit the world, and now I want to change the world to fit my kid. And I took that to heart, and that's what I want to do. I want to change this world to fit my child. And I know eventually he's going to be a man, and I'm hoping that when he is, that this world will know more about autism, and it wouldn't be this weird thing. They would look at him like, "Oh, I get it. I understand why he sways or why he spins. It's because he is on a spectrum, but that doesn't make him less of a person. He's a person." And I hope it becomes normalized where they're like, "Oh, it's just Alex. It's not Alex who has autism. It's not a kid with autism. It's Alex."
Just Alex.
So that's my hope.
Right.
And as a father, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is create a world for him, a better world for him.
Was there a moment during this, and what I mean by a moment is I speak about this on my podcast and in my leadership coaching that I do. I have this concept of what I call a spark moment, and that spark moment is basically just any pivotal moment in your life where you either in the moment, or you look back and you realize, hey, that was a big moment in either a positive or a negative way that really
Right.
caused this shift. was there a spark moment for you during the creation of this project when it got really serious, right, with Pixar, where you kind of realized the gravity of what you were doing?
Mm, I guess once the reactions came in from people after it came out, like I thought it was just like, oh, just a few people are gonna get it. But when the reactions started flooding in, and I started seeing, as you said, now I've become like some representative, and for not only the autism community but also the Filipino-American community, and that's when the I guess the spark hit. Like you said, now it's not just me messing around and okay, it's a fun picture out there. Now I have to talk on behalf of the autism community and the Filipino American community, and I welcome it. I'm grateful for that opportunity because we don't have a lot of representation, and if it is up to me, then I relish the chance to do so, to talk on our behalf, because we don't have a lot of people talking on our behalf.
That's incredible. And that was going to be my next question, and maybe I'll frame it a little differently. Is
Sure.
I was going to ask you if you're okay with this role, but I think I'll reframe it as, did you want that responsibility?
Um, if you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, no, I really don't. If you asked me at the beginning when I was in my deepest depression, I would be, hell no, I don't want this. And so I am surprised, and I am, but not also. I mean, I've come through this journey, and now I res- I am cool with the responsibility, and I'm ready for it. And a, it's great, like talking to you and people around the world. I feel like, oh, you guys are willing to listen to me. That also encourages me to do more and want to tell more and get this word out even more so. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll give you a little feedback on that, man. As somebody who made a big shift in his life, I know we don't know each other very well. We're just getting to know each other. But about 10 years ago, I was a guy that was, only concerned about money and success. And I was a corporate guy in the medical industry, and it was something that, the better I did personally in terms of money, that was my measure of life. And then
Right.
everything fell apart, man. Everything fell apart. I built this ego that was like, I couldn't fit my head through a doorway, and I thought I was
Right.
invincible, and it all fell
Right.
apart. And I found myself divorced with two little kids, um,
Hmm.
and just alone and really like depressed for the first time in my life. I never knew what that felt like. And so when I
Right.
got to that point, which was a low point for me, it was a rock bottom point, just in terms of how I felt, and I decided to rebuild. I rebuilt with purpose, and with
Right.
that purpose came just this new open mindset, open to new things. And I'm so happy to have discovered this life where I get to talk to people like you, other leaders. We both know, my buddy Mark Cordone, who's an
Yeah.
incredible human too. And I'm going to save, although I want to touch on the culture stuff, I'm going to save some of that for you and him to talk about, because that is
Okay.
totally his wheelhouse. But I do want to touch
Okay.
on some of it. But
Okay.
I get to meet people like you and Mark and all these other thought leaders that are out there. And I'm telling you right now, as a person that takes the stage very often, to speak on a stage, every voice is important. And if we have a skill set and we have something important to say that could help the world, and we're not doing it, what are we doing here, man? What's the point?
Yeah, you're
So
right.
I commend you for doing this, especially for somebody that didn't necessarily want that responsibility when you were in a different mindset, and now you've embraced it and you're doing good things with it, man. It's awesome.
Thanks, George. I
It's
really
awesome.
appreciate that,
Yeah.
man.
So The Launchcast is sponsored today by the Leadership Experience, a coaching masterclass. Intentional, unconventional, thoughtful leadership from keynote speaker, CEO, nonprofit board member, and TEDx executive producer, George Andriopoulos. Hey, that's me. Guys, the music's getting louder and it's epic, which means this is something you shouldn't miss. Registration opens on December 15th and we are beginning January 15th. This music is so loud. That means it's amazing. Join us, theleadershipexp.com for details. You don't want to miss this. So let's get into the culture. So when you pitched your story,
Yes.
even your own sketches and storyboard featured a Caucasian father and son originally, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and a coworker saw that cover and said, "Bobby, this is your story. The character should be Filipino-American, or Phil-Am, as you say."
Yeah.
I thought, does anyone want to see a Filipino-American character? And I had this unconscious bias, you admitted. What was that like, sort of crossing over that line of, I think all cultures out there, especially like the Americanized versions, I'm a Greek American, you're a Filipino American. There comes that little bit of I guess that repressed anger sometimes, where you're like, become like an angry version of your culture, right? Like, why aren't we represented?
Okay.
And it's totally different for me,
Yeah.
because even my culture is just a Mediterranean country. I'm still a Caucasian male. But for people that aren't Caucasian males, and I've spoken to Mark about this too, he used to call it that angry Asian vibe,
Okay. Right. Right.
And what was that like for you while you were coming to your own as a professional seeking representation out there?
Right. Well, I guess when I was looking around and I saw no representation, I guess I was still in the unconscious bias, like, well, I guess that's the way it is. I wasn't thinking that I could personally change things. And when Float came about, and when my coworker had suggested that, it was really more that it was really more what caught my attention was she said, "How's Alex gonna feel when he looks up and he sees a Caucasian boy representing himself?" And I was cool when it was just me, like the father being represented as a Caucasian male. But when she said, "How's Alex gonna feel?" I was like, "Oh, you're right. I don't want to perpetuate this. I want my son to feel empowerment. I want him to know that he was worth it." And so I am grateful that she brought it up. And because of that, now there are Filipino Americans all across the world who now get to see themselves up there, and to see that shift, or just not the shift, but to see the appreciation and the love and support of the Filipino community, and how they see themselves finally up there. It's thrilling, and I'm so overwhelmed by the response. And but yeah, it was because she mentioned Alex. Had she not, I would have went like, yeah, whatever. But when she did, that's it, man. You're talking about my son.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this for him, man.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. And I was reading more in terms of your thoughts on this, and it's interesting because you called Filipinos the invisible minority even within the Asian community, right? And
Yes.
I can totally see that. My wife is Asian as well. She's Chinese.
Okay.
And so when you meet and become friendly, or subsequently date and marry somebody, you get exposed to them and their culture, and I
Right.
never really paid attention before, but now when I read this about you, I'm like, yeah, like, okay, so the Chinese are probably the most represented Asian community out there.
Yes.
And so
Because they're the number one too.
within
Yeah,
the
they're the most.
minority as well, then there's like an invisible minority,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that must be.
We're
Go ahead.
Yeah, because we're like number 3. Okay, like I think the number 1 is Chinese, Number 2 is Indian. I believe we're number 3. Yet you would not know that if you were watching TV, because I see more Japanese and Korean people on TV. I'm like, wait, where's the Filipinos? We're number 3. Yet you don't even see us. Or not TV, but movies. Or if you do, it's not in lead roles. They're just in the background or side characters. Yeah, we just kind of blend in. I've read that somewhere, the quote, invisible minority.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, that's kind of true. We just kind of blend into the background. And I want to change that. I want to highlight and showcase our culture and hopefully get us hopefully we'll get more opportunities to tell our stories out there. So yeah.
And I love that. And you're doing that. I read something else where you said, when I was growing up, I didn't see many characters that looked like me on television or movies. And I'm thrilled that my children will have these guys. And hopefully they're just the beginning and will inspire more Phil-Am stories to come. And you're doing that with a project that you've been working on for quite a while, right? The Neighborhood Legend project?
Yeah, Neighborhood Legend. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, Neighborhood Legend is I wanted to create a Filipino superhero, because when I saw Black Panther and saw how like that just blew up and everyone's like loving it, I felt like, oh, I want to make a Filipino superhero and showcase our culture. And what we have in our culture is the Screama fighting, and people who know of it are people who are used to it being Nightwing from Batman, or Black Widow has Eskrima sticks. And I'm like, that's ours. And it would be nice if you actually saw a Filipino person actually doing our martial art. So I am creating this character, Danny Reyes, and he is the Neighborhood Legend, and it's going to have Filipino culture in it. And it's me just trying to showcase our martial art, our stories, and everything in this story. So that's my goal, at least.
Yeah. How long have you been working on that?
On
On and off.
and off about 2 years now, I think. It might have 2 years. I might have had the concept, and then and then I actually started taking the Screama classes. And I have a Screama professor, and he's been telling me more about it. So it's been getting tighter and tighter. I'm still kind of in the story phase, but it's getting there. Yeah.
That's very cool. I had a friend back in high school and college that was training with the Screama sticks through another discipline. I know he became eventually Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but
Oh, sweet.
I don't know if it was during jiu-jitsu, because he didn't. I'm actually a Kempo martial artist, and weapons
Oh,
were
nice.
part of not good.
Wait, you guys have like swords, right? Kempo, like the wood swords, or?
Yeah, there's broadsword. There are so many weapons that we are able to train with during. But I remember I'm just confused, because I remember Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really more about grappling. So I'm curious where he picked that up from. But yeah, he definitely trained with them. And
Right.
yeah, we used to mess around with them a little bit.
Yeah,
here
right.
too.
It's fun until you get whacked over the head. You're like, oh, I didn't think the bamboo stick would hurt that much. Yeah.
So what format, when hopefully this materializes and comes out, what format is this going to be? Is this going to be a comic book?
Maybe I should. I mean, I wanted to. Yeah.
Got
I
it.
want to be maybe more. We'll see. We'll
Understood. Very cool.
see. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, final question before we round out and start doing the big three. Final 2 questions.
Okay.
We talked about spark moments. I want you to keep that in mind, because when we close off the interview, we're going to be doing our segment called the Big Three, which I'll explain in a minute.
Okay.
But these spark moments in your life, I'm sure there's many. We all have these spark moments that kind of make us realize what that path is that we should be on, or what path not to take sometimes. And they help us to develop this leadership in our lives. So you're I feel like on an amazing path, man. You have you're a storyteller, and so I'm so excited to see what kind of stories you tell next, and how you're going to use those, to really help. But in terms of the leadership you're putting out there as a professional right now, do you feel like you have balance right now within that leadership or in your life?
I'd like to think so. I think my wife says I still need to work on it. But yes, I think I decently, because I mean, I work a lot, and then when I go home, I'm still hustling, still trying to think of ideas, but I do try to take time out to play with my kids, and have time with my wife. Um, the thing is now that the kids are like 12 and 14, they don't really hang out with me as much as when they were much younger. I needed to like go to the zoo and everything with them. Now they're all into their games and phones, so there's even less complaint that daddy's not really hanging out much. But I do feel like I feel like I'm doing a pretty decent balance, I think.
So what does balance mean to you, Bobby?
Balance to me is that I have enough time to create my own stories and also to fulfill my artistic abilities and ambitions, and also work at Pixar and work within this amazing company and be a part of helping them tell their stories, and then also being a family man and doing what's right for my children and my wife and us having happiness. I find that's a balance. I always, when I do my prayers, I always ask for happiness, health, and independence. And I think I say independence for my son because like he's on the spectrum, and I'm hoping that he has that. But I always wish for that. I always hope for that. And that's my goals: happiness, health, and independence.
That's very cool, man. I focus a lot on balance because balance was the thing that really brought everything together for me for years after, my low point when I really worked on myself, worked on my relationship with my kids first, and tried to become like super dad, and
Right.
and then integrated my work life into that rather than doing it the other way around, and then, excelling at my career and owning my company and everything. And all of a sudden I was carrying, these balls like in every different direction. And although I was doing good stuff, it became very difficult. And then I realized something that I like to call the balance phenomenon, where it was that moment. It was that moment that Neo understood the Matrix, right? It was that moment that Luke understood the Force. It was like everything just clicked, and it was like, you know what? That's all the same person. They don't have to be different people that I'm leading different lives. It's if I can combine those and realize that that's the authentic self, that's me out there doing all those things, and I could be that same person in all those different aspects of my life. I think that's how I can tie it together. And that was like the secret where it just all started working. Not that it always works, man, because
Okay. I was
no.
wow, I haven't hit that.
Life
Neo.
is beautiful, but life can also be a goddamn disaster sometimes. All right, so let's jump into the big three.
Okay.
The big three from the Launchcast.
Here we are, the big three. These are, Bobby, your top three answers for each thing that I list. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Give me your top three spark moments in your life.
Top three sparks moments in my life. Okay. The one I could think of is, right off the bat, is when my wife told me you should probably make the float and get out of your misery, because that's where I was stuck. I was stuck in my misery, and instead of wallowing in despair, choose hope and choose another way out of this despair. So I think that's one, when I chose hope versus wallowing in despair. That's one. Two, I suppose, was when I first made my first comic book. Um, this happened after I didn't make Animator at Disney. I was like, you know what, man, I could be replaced. I want to tell my own story, and I'm gonna make this comic book. I'm gonna do Alcatraz High. And so when I did that, that was another spark, because like I think it's from like I said, my mother had her own company. I'm like, I don't have to be Disney. I could be my own person. I could be my own self. So I'm gonna create my own comic book. So that's number two. And number three, I'm like trying to think of family, something family related, because I mean, I suppose it would be my wife. My wife and I are high school sweethearts. And so, I mean, without her, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I know that. So that would be the third spark, meeting my wife, Susan.
Cool. Top three most terrifying moments.
Most terrifying moments. Definitely one is the diagnosis of Alex. I was so terrified that because autism is such an unknown, especially at the beginning, because it's a wide spectrum. I don't know, where does he fall? Does he fall on the lower end of the spectrum or the high end? And that was so terrifying, not the unknown, because I'm facing the unknown. That's one. Number two, which isn't so terrifying after that, is when I didn't make Animator. It seems silly now, but back then I was like, well, I trained all my life to be this Disney animator, and I got a taste of it with Treasure Planet, but now that 2D's gone, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And Disney just let me go. And I have no idea what I'm going to do now. Wow. And I remember telling that to my wife. I was like, I'm not an animator. I'm nothing. I am nothing. And she's like, no, you're not. You're still Bobby. You can do a whole lot of things. You're more than just an animator. And I appreciated that she said that. But that was terrifying, because I had built my whole life to becoming a Disney animator.
Yeah.
And then at 3, terrifying. Off the bat, what else is? You know what? I guess I'm blessed in that. Those are the only 2 that come to mind. Yeah.
Top 3, and I know this is a tough one. This is like ranking your children, sort of, but projects you've worked on.
Oh, okay. Of course, number 1's Float, because that was the most gratifying thing I've done so far. Is Float. That's number 1. Number 2, Incredibles 2, because like I said, when I heard that they were doing Incredibles 1, I was like, no way, I got to get on that. And I want to work with Brad Bird so badly. Number 2 would be Incredibles 2. And then 3 would be Alcatraz High, my own comic book, because I'm like, that's mine, and they can never take that away from me.
Yeah. All right, this one is sort of a 2-parter, right? We're going to start with top 3 comic book characters of all time.
Oh, geez. Top 3 comic book characters. Number 1 is Nightwing, as I mentioned, because he was a new Teen Titan, and also he has a Screama Sticks, and he used to be Robin. So number 1 is Nightwing. Number 2, from the MCU, my favorite MCU character is Iron Man. So Robert Downey Jr. started it all, man. So that's number 2. And then number 3, it's a tough one. It's a toss-up between Batman and Superman, because who do you pick?
Okay. It's a tie.
Okay.
How about top 3 comic books out right now?
right now. Top 3 comic books. I guess I gotta go with the classic X-Men, Spider-Man, and because I'm thinking, what do I actually read? I do read Spider-Man, X-Men, and Captain America. Captain America.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Final one.
Marvel, which is weird. Okay.
Final
It sticks with the family.
one. Top 3 failures.
Failures. Top 3 failures. I suppose one is that I didn't accept my son sooner. Like shouldn't have went this far. 2, failures. I mean, I didn't become when I became an animator and it stopped. Oh, I tried to be an animator like 2 times. The first time I didn't make it, so that was a huge fail, and so luckily I got another opportunity to finally be one. That happened, and the third failure would be, I mean, the thing is, there's so much, right? What do you choose? Because we're all human, we all make mistakes, and you rise up from those failures. You just learn from those failures. So I'm trying to think of
I'll
the
tell you
third
right now,
one.
I think 75% of my interviews have ended with not being able to get the third one on the failure. And
Oh,
saying
really?
Exactly what you
Yeah,
said.
because you tend to go like, okay, here's the 2 big ones, but then what's the third? And you're like,
I'll
we
take
can't.
it.
Okay, all right, let's do
I'll
that.
take it. Guys, Bobby Rubio, thank you so much for being here, man. This was so awesome. This was so
Oh,
awesome.
thank you, George. It was my pleasure, man.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I'm
really
going to do
appreciate it.
this, and this means we did it.
Sweet. All right.
Guys, real quick, I'm going to do my moment of inspiration we do on every show. Today's moment of acceptance, guys, is about acceptance in this world. We talk about leadership on this podcast, and it's so important that leaders have a passion in terms of what they do and the messages that they're trying to spread. And people like Bobby Rubio here, who created a short piece for Pixar based on his relationship with his son, really put an important idea out there. And what's so cool about it is that the idea was really open for interpretation. It doesn't have to be about autism. It could be about any differences that we have. And so this piece is so important. And in order for something like this to come full circle, in order for the goal of this piece to be met, it means that we as the audience have to be accepting of what this piece is about. And that's really acceptance and inclusion and understanding. And so I've been toying with this idea of something called an accidental advocate. I came across this when thinking about how the parent or the parents of children on the autism spectrum instantly become advocates of their children once they are born and diagnosed with autism. And so there's a thought inside of me that really is curious about why that happens instantaneously. Somebody that may not have really thought about autism or thought about what that means to them personally, and all of a sudden it touches them and they are instantly advocates. And there's something so beautiful about that we can really learn from as individuals in this world. And so I want people to really think about that. And I don't want it to be in a negative way, but think about the mindset that a parent must go through when they become an accidental advocate for their children. And think about what process really happens in their brains, in their hearts, to cause them to just instantly become understanding. And try and apply that in your life, because it's so important. Because it's so important that we are accepting of each other. Because it's so important that we are accepting of each other and understanding in order to really make a change in this world. That's our inspirational thought for the day. All right, guys, again, thank you, Bobby Rubio, for being here. Awesome having you. Hope to have you back one day again.
Yes, of course. That'd be awesome.
All right, guys, see you later.
to the black hole.
Thanks for listening to the Launchcast today. Please make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available. Follow me, George Andriopoulos, at Launchpad CEO on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And make sure to visit our website, guys, thelaunchcast.com. Looking forward to the next episode. See you soon, guys.